We can call the meeting to order. So I'd like to say good morning to everyone. I'm Adele Imrie, Chair of the TCHC Board's Building Investment Finance and Audit Committee, and I'd like to welcome everyone to today's public session of the committee. I would like to begin with an acknowledgement that the land each of us is on as we hold this virtual meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So today is my last meeting as chair of BIFAC, and I just will be moving chairs and assuming the role of chair of the board. And I just wanted to say that I've been honored to serve as the BIFAC chair for the last 4 years. I've certainly learned a lot about TCHC in that time, and I hope that that knowledge will serve me well as chair. I'd like to thank Roseanne Lee and Lily Chen as the staff liaisons for this committee. I want to thank them for their patience in helping me understand the financial complexities of TCHC. I did want to offer a special thanks to Sonia and Kaylee, who organize me every meeting and make sure I have my script and I know who's showing up and what's going on. And I also appreciate their patience. I did want to thank all members of the ELT and the members of their staff that work really hard on these reports. I know that they're presented by ELT members, but they have a whole team that contribute to the preparation of the reports that are made to BIFAC. I have great respect for the time and effort that everyone puts into the work that's presented to BIFAC. And I just want you to know, I think that you do, that I actually read every one of the reports that are presented. I know I have a reputation for asking lots of questions, and it's helped me to understand what goes on at TCHC. But I also hope that that you've learned from the questions that are asked, because they certainly all come from a very constructive place. And I think that applies to all the committee members. So I hope that you respect our role as we respect yours and certainly your contribution. I also wanted to thank my fellow committee members. It's been and will continue to be a pleasure to serve on the TCHC board with all of you. And I certainly appreciate your shared commitment to BIFAC over these years. I would like to offer my special thanks to Nick, who is taking over for me as the committee chair. I know that the committee is in really, really good hands, although they're all male hands. I want you to know it's 5 guys that are running the show here. So I know Lily's going to keep you in line. I have no question about that. I think the committee is heading into an important phase for TCHC with, the financial sustainability report. And I think that that's really, really important. So I appreciate your leadership with that, because, the service that TCHC provides to the city is critical. And it is critical that TCHC succeeds and is able to provide the funding, provide the service and receive the funding to serve our tenants, as that is the #1 priority for TCHC. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. It's been a really interesting 4 years as BIFAC chair. So good luck, Nick. Good luck. And I really appreciate that all the committee members have chosen to stay on the committee, because I think particularly when it comes to BIFAC, I think having that understanding and knowledge is really critical to moving forward. So thank you. So during today's public session, there are 7 reports being brought forward for the committee's information. There are 5 standing quarterly reports and 2 annual reports from facilities management. And there are also a number of reports requiring approval, and they are all outlined on our agenda. Although the tenants and members of the public have every opportunity to depute, they can either do it by joining our meeting or providing a written deputation. We did not have any requests for deputations at today's meeting. So moving on to the agenda, I would like to ask if there are any additions or deletions to today's agenda. Hearing none, I would like to ask if any members have any conflicts as it relates to any items on the agenda today. Okay, hearing none, could I ask if any members have any items on the agenda that they would like to pull for further discussion? John? I think you're on mute, John.
Right, sorry. I'd like to hold number 6.
Number 6?
Number 7 and number 9 and 9C.
9C. Okay, are there any other items that anyone would like to pull?
9F and 9I.
9F and 9I. Any others, Brian? Yours have all been pulled? Okay, and I just had 9G, and I think I had a quick question on 9D. So could I have a motion to approve the agenda, excluding 6, 7, 9C, D, F, G, and I? Nick, seconder John, thank you. All in favor? Perfect. So then we will move to item 6, which is the review of the Procurement Awards Committee charters and BIFAC charters. And I will turn this over to Dara.
So, committee members, the report describes some changes that we are proposing to effect to both the charter for the Procurement Awards Committee, which is a committee of executive leadership within TCHC that has delegated authority to award commitments on behalf of the organization subject to certain conditions, and the charter for the Building Investment Finance and Audit Committee, this committee. The changes that are being proposed are intended to do 2 things. One is to align the financial limits of the Procurement Awards Committee and BIFAC with the financial award limits that exist in other city agencies, including the City of Toronto and the TTC. And as well, to further the ability of this committee and the board to focus its discussions in relation to matters that relate to strategy and overall policy without agendas that become focused on operational approvals. The specific changes that are proposed in the report would, in relation to the Building Investment Finance and Audit Committee, the change would increase the authority of this committee to approve financial commitments on behalf of the organization from $5 million to $10 million. And as far as the changes that are being proposed at the Procurement Awards Committee, those changes affect a number of the committee conditions that apply to approval of commitments at the committee level. They would increase, with one exception, the authority of the committee to approve a financial commitment on behalf of TCHC from $2.5 million to $5 million. They would authorize the committee to approve commitments related to consulting contracts that aren't directly related to development or to capital repair projects, subject to the current limit of the committee, which is $2.5 million. They would also contemplate the ability of the committee to approve commitment changes in a slightly different way. Right now, that the committee's authority in relation to approvals of commitment changes is capped at $2.5 million. It would increase the overall limit that the committee can approve to $5 million, subject to a further qualification that where it is required to elevate the matter to this committee if the value of the change order exceeds the greater of 20% of the original contract price or $1 million. Beyond those changes, it also makes some administrative changes to the committee charter. It amends the title of our Chief People and Culture Officer from the former title, Vice President of Human Resources. And it adds as a member of the committee, the Vice President of Facilities Management. We believe the changes will enhance TCHC's ability to advance commitments on behalf of the organization, subject to appropriate controls. In order for the committee to approve a commitment, even with these changes, requires unanimity of all committee members, which is all of the executive leadership at TCHC as described in the document. It has to be a competitive process where the director of procurement has confirmed that the commitment is being awarded in accordance with our procurement policies and procedures. Those criteria, which will continue to apply to the ability of the committee to make those awards, we believe, ensures that appropriate controls will operate when those awards are being made. And of course, later on the agenda for this meeting, you will see that on a quarterly basis, we will continue to report to this committee on awards that have been made by the Procurement Awards Committee, so that while the awards are occurring at that committee level, they're reported to this committee so that there's transparency as to the work that's being done at that level. Subject to any questions, I think that describes the changes that are being proposed in the document before the committee today.
Adele?
I believe both Director Smith and Director Campbell have questions.
Adele, are you there? Or are you on mute?
I think that you're muted. Okay.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Sorry. Brian?
The assumption is that these I don't have any problems with the change in the limits. My question is, the assumption is that the budget, these funds are within the approved budget of that have been passed.
That's correct. And as a matter of the consideration of those matters at committee, it's required that reports to the committee identify the funding sources for the commitments that are presented for approval.
Thank you.
John?
Well, I don't understand the comparison with the dollar amounts by comparing us to either the city or the TTC, which are much, much larger entities. So from where did these changes originate?
So I think that subject to I'm happy to start, and then if Jag wanted to supplement my comments. The changes are driven, I think, by the factors that that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. We've heard from members of the board that the board intends to or seeks to try and focus on issues of larger policy and strategy, and that there are from time to time concerns about the volume of the material that committee members for this committee, for example, are required to address on a regular basis at the committee level. We're trying to support that initiative by ensuring that commitment approvals at the PAC level are able to take that off the board agenda where we think that executive leadership at TCHC can deal with those commitment levels. And then the other consideration, and this is more operational and driven by management, is that there is a need with respect to these commitments from time to time to be able to convene the required approval authority to get approval of a commitment in order to move forward with a contract, in order to do things like effectively implement our capital works mandate and our state of good repair contracts. And the intention in that regard is that it is more efficient to have those contracts approved and considered at the level of executive leadership within the organization, who can be quickly brought together in order to consider that kind of a request. Jag, did you want to add to that?
Thanks, and through you, Chair Emery, I think it's also reflective. The PAC process isn't the same. The processes and due diligence that we have within the organization aren't necessarily reflected in the comparator organizations either. So we do have a different due diligence model within TCHC. It's also the spend profile and the pace at which we are, I guess, incur our spend versus potentially longer term spend horizons, I guess, in the other organizations. For example, with our capital program and the 350 million, the pace at which we are doing so is also a different factor as compared to the other organizations. And once again, I don't believe they have the same internal process that puts that added layer of due diligence in place.
So my comment would be that this leads to less scrutiny of contracts, because so am I correct in saying that the threshold is now going from 2.5 million to 5 million? Is that the way I read this? So that whereas previously we would have had to approve and review contracts of 2.5 million, now it's going to be 5 million. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The proposal is that if a contract has a value through a competitive process of less than $5 million, where budget money is available and we've followed our procurement policies, that contract should be a contract that the Procurement Awards Committee can approve, but has to be regularly reported to BIFAC.
And so how many contracts would that have involved in 2022?
I believe that Lily, our chief chief financial officer, has done some analysis and reviewed that with the BIFAC chair. I believe the number is actually relatively small, but these can be significant contracts from the perspective of making sure that that the work that we are required to do in order to serve our tenants is done.
Yeah. So, but what's the number?
Thank you, through the chair, Director Campbell, for that question. So in 2022, we had roughly around 682 contracts in total, falling under the threshold of between 5 million to 10 million is around 9 contracts.
9. So we're doing this for 9 contracts.
Yeah. No, that's the future state. In terms of the threshold between 500,000 to 5 million, it was around 120.
But in terms of the appreciable difference that this is going to make, we're talking only about 9 contracts. Okay, so, okay. So.
No, I think, John, the number you want to see is between.
Sorry?
I think the number you want to see is between 2.5 and 5, because that's the change in the threshold.
9 contracts.
No,
No.
that's over
No,
5.
it's incorrect.
No,
It's 5 to 10 million.
It-
So, and Lily, I don't know if you have 2.5 to 5 million clearly carved out, but if you could give your best guess to that.
I do. It's actually 10, it's roughly 10 contracts actually. Yeah.
10 contracts. Okay, so I was off by 1. Okay. Okay, well, you know, I'm not going to support this because I don't see the need for it. And, you know, one of the things that we're here for is to provide oversight and scrutiny, and this leads to less oversight and scrutiny. So, I mean, that's just my feeling. I don't have any further questions.
Okay, Brian?
Well,
Oh,
I
sorry,
know,
Nick. So
I'm
Brian
sorry.
had his
Go
hand
ahead,
up.
go ahead, Nick, because I've already had
Okay.
one shot. I'll have another after
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I just for sort of counterpoint, the volume of overall decisions, it's not just these decisions in isolation, the volume of overall decisions and review that we conduct is a factor in my mind, as well as the overall size of the organization, the processes that are in place, the overall budget, and the ability to free up time to be more strategic and focus on the bigger issues. I think it makes sense to delegate to management, given the thorough and, you know, belt and suspenders approach they have through the PAC committee on awarding contracts. So just to say, as a counterpoint in terms of the sheer number, and it may increase over time, that's sort of historic.
Just to add to that, I agree with Nick, and I guess my fallback would be to say that, you know, we will have looked at some of these issues when we do the budget, because all this money is part of a planning process. And we should understand that there are significant contracts to be awarded during the year for a variety of projects. And as long as we follow our processes we put in place for review, I think the staff is going to be reporting back to us, you know, those decisions. I don't have a problem with it.
I do agree with Nick and Brian. I think that there are other ways that we will be continuing to exercise our oversight role, as opposed to looking at specific contracts. And I think relative to the other organizations, I do think that this is reasonable, and as Nick says, it frees up the organization or the committee to be doing more strategic work. But you know, I don't think we have less oversight, because we're not looking at the 10 contracts between 2.5 and 5. I do hope that as we make this change, that you know, I think procurement is an area that needs to be considered by the organization, and I hope they will, you know, make that a priority as we make this change. It will be part of certainly a much larger review of procurement and how we ensure that the organization is getting good value for money.
I
So
guess
are
one
there-
other
Oh, yeah,
question
Brian, go
I
ahead.
have, how much of this relates to development? You know, if we separate operating from development, because will some of this, these contracts also move over when that piece of the work moves?
Thanks, Director Smith. Right now, in terms of development portfolio, we don't have many procurement activities because it's the work with Tridel, our development partner. In terms of that CCDC 5A, it's just some sub-trades contract and also consultant. In terms of your question between capital repairs and operating, the majority of our procurement activity are centering around meeting the annual obligation of that 350 million capital project delivery. So it's in various forms, and then we have a very small percentage, I would say between 5 to 10% related to the operational activities with the operational division and also IT procurement.
I'd be glad to move that forward.
So are there any other questions or comments? Can I have a motion to approve? Nick, Brian, seconder, all in favor? Okay, 3, all opposed? John, thank you. So motion is carried. Thank you very much, Dara. And we will move on to item number 7. And I will ask Nadia to speak to this.
So thank you, Chair Emery. I'm going to turn it over to our Senior Director of Business Operations,
Richard?
Roach,
Okay.
who will speak to the item and take any questions that the committee may have.
This is a demonstration of how the ELT relies on their team, as I alluded to in my opening remarks.
Good morning, Chair. This is a change order to the contracts for extension of supply of appliances. We're seeking your approval to issue a change order to the Brick Warehouse doing business as Mid-Northern Appliances for up to $501,000, exclusive of tax, for the supply and installation of appliances for up to a 4-month period as needed for all TCHC units.
So I think, John, you pulled this.
So
Okay,
does do these amounts represent a price increase, or is it price neutral to the previous contract?
Through the chair, these are price neutral. They're to the existing contract that's in place.
And how often, so this is for fridges and stoves?
Through the chair, that's correct. Fridges and stoves, and periodically microwave ovens, depending on the setup of the unit.
Right. And how often do we replace fridges and stoves? Or is it
Fridges
only,
and stoves.
Is it only when they're broken down, or do we have a regular regime of replacement?
Through the chair, we do have a regime of inspecting the appliances. We identify or try to identify what the lifespan of that equipment will be as part of our unit turnover process. So if it is nearing its end of life, we may choose to swap it out as part of a unit turnover process. In tenancy, it would be inspected as part of our annual unit inspections. And if it's in reasonably good condition, then it would remain in place until end of life.
Right. Okay. And approximately, so Richard, approximately how many fridges or how many stoves do we have to buy every year?
Through the chair, that number tends to fluctuate significantly. We do know that the West region in particular does have older equipment, just dependent on what contracts were in place and what the products were used through different contracts previously. We have seen significant fluctuation over the last 3 years around how much appliances we are using or how much we are needing. And it's primarily driven on usage, as well as our increased motivation around filling vacancies and turning over units quickly. So we've seen a significant amount of fluctuation.
Right, but do you have any kind of a number that you could, I mean, we have 50,000 units in total, so how many refrigerators do we have to buy every year?
Through the chair, I would have to take that away and get back to you with separately.
Okay. I'd be curious to know that. And so the brick is one potential supplier. How many other suppliers are there in this particular area?
Through the chair, there are 3 suppliers in the Toronto area that can generally meet a portion or a large portion of our portfolio's needs. Mid-Northern is the largest one that does maintain the most ample product supply. And then there's 2 others, HD Supply and Care.
And then, so they're essentially, and are there particular brands, or do the brands change?
So as through the chair, as part of our contracts, we do establish the thresholds for what the products are. We set the specifications, the measurements, and the expectations. And then through the submissions of the proponents, they have to affirm that they can access the appropriate product. So we try to standardize what we're using across the city, mainly from a parts perspective as well.
Yeah, of course. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Richard or for Nadia? Okay, hearing none. Could I have a motion to approve the change order for the contract extension of the appliance supply program? John, thank you. Could I have a seconder? Nick, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you.
Take care, and your motion's been approved. So we will move on to the next item that was pulled, and it's 9C. And I guess this is Alan.
Thank you, Chair Emery. I can give a brief introduction to this report. Item 9C requests approval in the amount of $2.5 million to purchase the security hardware required to complete our 2023 security projects. Public RFP was issued for the equipment, and the recommendation is to accept the low bid for the supply of this equipment. We do purchase this equipment up front because history has proven that we want to ensure that we have the supply of the equipment so that we can execute the projects that have been determined to be part of our 2023 program, as well as buying in bulk up front. We believe does help obtain a better pricing than to purchase purchase the equipment separately for each project as it's done.
So my question is this, sorry, Adele, I was the one who held this.
Yes, I know.
So has this company supplied us with equipment previously?
I believe that they have, but I can check. Boyd Dyer, who is our Director of Smart Buildings and Energy Management. I recognize the name Vista Security. Boyd, have they provided us equipment in the past?
I believe that they have, but it was quite a while ago. So this is a recent successful bid on their part.
And is the equipment warranted?
Yes, it's part of the specification. It has to be.
And so, and how long is it warranted for?
It's generally warranted for approximately 1 year.
That's all, 1 year. And is the warranty? Do we in the RFP we state? Do we only ask for a 1 year warranty?
I think that's just the general manufacturer's warranty on the equipment. So we don't necessarily specify the warranty. It's just known what the actual warranty is on this type of equipment.
What's the lifespan of this sort of equipment?
Mostly 10 years. We normally have equipment in place for approximately 10 years before we start to move on a swap.
Okay, and because there would be technology changes, I would gather.
Yes, and there's probably a major one coming up in the next few years, because we are basically hitting our 10-year life cycle on this particular equipment and infrastructure. This started in 2023. It's 2013, sorry.
And so what's your experience with past equipment and breakdown and repair? Is it fairly reliable, or does it?
That is exactly why we buy this particular equipment. We use March recorders. It's the same recorders that are used by the banks and by Walmart, or basically every major large organization throughout the world. They're probably one of the most reliable from a field deployment perspective. We also use Axis cameras as well, because they're the largest manufacturer in the world. They were the ones who actually developed digital cameras. They are based out of Europe, but they have a presence in Canada. We tend to use better equipment just because for the reliability factor.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I won't be able to ask those questions again because it was only a $2.5 million award, but I appreciate the information.
No worries.
Boyd, I just had a general question and it relates to homes and wondering if homes is helpful in being able to track equipment and whether it is under warranty. This actually goes to appliances as well and any kind of equipment that we purchase. But I know that that was presented early on when we were looking at homes. Is that in place and operational?
To be honest with you, I don't actually know. I'd have back to you with that.
Through the chair, I can speak to that. That is part of the inventory that we would need to look at with facilities management because it's not in there yet, but that certainly can be included. Now, I know though, Boyd, your team does track the equipment that you have. You do know
you're
it.
Doing it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, ideally though, we want to have one place, right, where all equipment is tracked versus, and I hate to say it, but there is equipment that's tracked on spreadsheets, whether that, I'm not saying necessarily that all of Boyd's equipment is tracked, but, you know, with furnaces and things like that, boilers, we do have it tracked on spreadsheets. And I know, Boyd, that your team tracks the equipment, but again, it's more of a manual process. So certainly anything that we can do to, I don't want to say automate it because you still have to put the information in, but to consolidate it into one place, that will obviously be better for us to have everything in one place.
Okay, and my understanding was that homes had that capability.
I believe there is an inventory function in homes.
Okay.
And I know that definitely my team has been, I believe the implementation of it is being led through Lily's team, but definitely I know that my team has been involved and I'm sure that there's others from operations involved as well.
Okay, because I know we talked about, you know, things, you know, fridges would be barcoded and so that we knew where they were and whether they were under warranty and be able to track if a certain brand, and it doesn't sound like this is an issue for Boyd, but if a certain brand was maybe not performing well. And okay.
Absolutely.
So it's a work in progress is what you're telling me, Ellen.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's you know, like I even know, or like our hot water tanks, we have a list of them, which client care has, but it's a manual process. If a tenant calls in to say they've got a problem with their hot water tank, client care has to open up a separate folder to see, okay, here's your address, here's your hot water tank. Yes, that's under warranty. So that's a manual process versus when I believe we have everything implemented through homes, it would be more of a pop-up that would happen to say this is under warranty. It's the same with our roof. You know, when we have roofing done, there's warranties that are on roofing, and it's a manual process for us when we get roof leaks that we need to look at. When was the roof last replaced? Is it still under warranty? Is this a warranty item that we need to go back to the installer? Or is it the roof is 20 years old, there's no warranty on it, and it's just a general maintenance call that would go out? But absolutely, the more we can get rid of the manual processes, absolutely the better.
And I can just imagine the quantity of information that would have to be input, but I was just wondering if there is a timeline or, you know, for different phases, and maybe Lily can answer that.
Thanks, Chair Emery, for that question. It is on our implementation roadmap. We start the planning phase and with the support of KPMG. We have also some preliminary scoping out as well. At this point, it's going to be a stage gating process, especially in terms of resource prioritization and also availability from the cross-functional team. I would say you're able to estimate, I would say probably mid to later 2024, it will be fully implemented.
Yeah, I can just imagine the volume of work. Brian.
Well, that was my question. I raised it earlier with regards to putting in something in the 2024 budget to input all this, because it's, I think, pretty much asking too much to tell staff to be doing this on top of everything else. And we need to build, you know, it's a one-time, once you get it in and staff are trained to maintain it and update it as things change, is one thing to expect. Another thing is to and put this huge amount of data in the machine. And if, you know, we paid a lot of money for it, we might as well start using it as soon as possible. So I would suggest that we look at putting in some funding for data input for staff, so that you know, it's not required to be piled on top of everything else they're doing.
So Lily, you'll include that in your planning
Absolutely. Thanks,
consideration?
yeah, Director Smith, for that direction. Yeah.
Are there any other questions as it relates to this award? Okay, could I have a motion to approve? John, Brian seconder. Thank you. All in favor? Okay, motion is passed. Thank you, Boyd. The next item is item 9D. And it's the architectural fees. And I guess this is Alan as well. And
Yes.
I pulled this. Do you want me to just ask my question?
Whatever works for you, I'm good
Okay.
with, Chair Emery.
Well, so my question is very simple. There's a reference to a change order that Toronto Seniors requested in this. So it talks about the costs increasing on this project. It's a percentage architect's fees. So I'm
Correct.
presuming that the change order is because the costs have gone up.
Correct.
And one of the explanations for the cost going up is seniors. And I just wondered how that mechanism works and what their input is into these projects as far as requesting change orders.
Certainly. It's treated as any other change order. So when there's the request for change, it would be reviewed with operations, or in this case, Toronto Seniors, to determine if it's something that should be added to the scope of the project. And if it's agreed to by TCHC as being something that's necessary, or it would also be looked at as to whether, you know, what's the benefit to the tenant if there is a tenant impact on it. It isn't something that they can just unilaterally request and we agree to. It does have to be reviewed by the TCHC facilities management project lead, who is on that team, which would be project lead from the construction side as well as from the design and engineering side. And then once we agree to it as TCHC, then also the third-party consultant that is on record for the project is brought in to ensure that the pricing that the contractor is bringing forward is fair and reasonable for that scope of work that's being reviewed. So it isn't just one person can make a request and it's done. Absolutely not.
And I'm presuming if you're doing work on seniors buildings that you would engage them up front.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So that there's
absolutely.
not change orders.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the same when I explained the process for how we prioritize projects, when I mentioned that we have meetings with the regions. Sorry, when I say region, I automatically include seniors, as I know they're no longer a region. So I should be clear on that. But we go through the same process with seniors housing to review building by building, our capital planning team, along with their version of the operations team, to help prioritize projects. And they're involved every step of the way. The same engagement that we do with TCHC tenants, we do with Toronto Seniors tenants. Again, it depends on the project. If we're replacing a boiler, we're not going to be engaging tenants in that. However, when we're doing an accessibility project or something that you know, has tenant
Within
impact,
reason is
yes,
what you're.
yes, absolutely. I just don't want to think we engage tenants for every project, because we don't, but we do engage them where there is tenant impact, and we want to get their input. And it can be a matter of explaining the project. It can also be if we're doing lobby upgrades or common area hallway upgrades. We also do engage tenants in terms of having them, you know, select from color palettes and things like that, because it is their building. obviously we put collar palettes together because we have to make sure we meet accessibility requirements and things like that. But tenants do have input into the project where we can get that input.
Great, thank you. Brian, did you put your hand up on this? I thought I saw your hand. No?
No.
Oh, okay,
I put
sorry.
it up by accident.
Okay. So are there any other questions as it relates to this change order for architectural fees? Okay, hearing none, can I have a motion to approve this change order? John, thank you. Nick? Thank you. All in favor? Perfect. And thank you for the input on seniors. So I will move to item number 9F, which is the Q1 2023 Facilities Management Quarterly Capital Budget Update. And again, Alan, this is over to you.
Yes.
I think this is my question, so I'm happy just to jump to the question.
Perfect.
It's really just frankly, I don't totally understand the chart, and so it could just be me, but I want to understand it. Page 87 of the package. I'm not sure if it's the nice colorful charts with the, yeah, there we go. So I just wasn't clear. So original budget, I understand that. Q1 completion, I get that. Q4 forecast at Q1, and then Q1 adjustment. And do you mind just like help me understand those three columns, please?
Certainly, Director McRae, through the chair. You're correct that the original budget is what was approved by the board. Then Q1 completion, obviously Q1, what we've done, and then the Q4 forecast, and perhaps maybe at Q1 might not be the best thing to put. This is us looking at what we anticipate we're going to be completing as of year end based on what we have from Q1. And then we are making an adjustment to that column
So it's the reforecast for the year.
Correct. Absolutely. Maybe that's what we should call it, is a reforecast for year end. Then Q1 adjustment is showing if we're making any adjustments to it. And then that would be what our revised budget is for Q1. And then we'll continue to do this on a quarterly basis. Sorry, we do it more than a quarterly basis, but we report it quarterly.
So get the reforecast, the Q1 adjustment. Is the Q1 adjustment the difference between what Q1 completed was versus what Q1 expected was, or that's in addition to the reforecast, there's another adjustment to then sort of the final revised, forward forecast, or what's the Q1 adjustment related to?
It's related to what we're changing back to the original budget. So it might be clearer if you go down with what's on the screen. The one that's at the very top is a little different because that's our carry forward, where we had completed more work in the previous year and we're bringing it into this year. But if we look down, let's say at well, maybe the first one, COXX, which is the demand capital. So we had a budget of 31 million originally approved by the board. We've completed 33 million already. This is something that was identified last year that we knew we were going to need to change. We've forecasted that for year end, we're going to come in around 107 million. So we need to make an adjustment to that $33 million budget of $76 million to bring us to a new budget, or a reforecasted budget as of the end of Q1 for 107. And then we will, at Q2, we'll see where we are with Q2 to see if our 107 is still holding true. And if we need to make an adjustment one way or the other, then we would make an adjustment in the Q2 process.
Okay. I think I understand. Okay, so that's helpful. It does sort of highlight that one item of that the annual budget was 31 million and 33 million was spent in Q1, and they were going to be 108 million for the year.
Yeah, it was definitely something with Chair Emery's input that was, recognized that we should be better budgeting for it, and so that's what we've tried to do with this report. and we will continue to do that as we move forward. And also for the 2024 budget, which obviously we're starting that process now, we'll ensure that the initial original approved budget put forward for 2024 will have more in the demand column to make sure that it's better aligned with what the actual spend is going to be.
So Alan, I did also had a couple of questions on this, and I just wondered if maybe you can show, particularly when we're approving the budget, if you could include a projection for the year end for the prior year, just so we have a sense of, because, you know, as you mentioned, COXX last year, I think we spent 120 million or something, and the original budget was 50, but I think it will help committee members and the board when they're approving the 350
Certainly.
budget, if they can see what was spent last year, to see how reasonable it looks. And I just wanted to ask about, you know, if you have any concerns that you've now Q1 is done, but you've utilized your full contingency in the contingency line. And then impact on, because I think this is a truncated, there were a few things that you're basically taking off the table. There was one for 3 million.
There is another page to this, yes. In order to meet the accessibility, we have to have a certain font size, so it doesn't fit.
Okay. So some of these projects that you're cutting out 26 million, just to understand what impact that has on the organization. And then there was another one where you're cutting out 22. You're basically cutting these budgets in half, and what impact that has on, because obviously this was planned work and now you're not completing it. So
certainly I can do that. So when we do the budget, it is earlier, you know, quite a bit before we actually get to actually implementing them. So in terms of contingency, we are forecasting that we wouldn't have any contingency left at the end of the year. There is, however, contingency within envelopes as well, in terms of that we don't have projects equaling each envelope at the time, so that there is contingency in there, so we have the flexibility to move them. We do, when we have to change projects, you know, we do take a look at any of the impacts that there would be. We are keeping in mind of the requirements that we have in terms of our funders, specifically with CMHC, where there's the energy target that we have to achieve, as well as accessibility targets. So we do take that into consideration. With the holistic building, we have seen a little bit of a slowdown in that program, just in terms of getting everything going. So they are projects that we will still continue with. However, we do have to also look at, because of our requirements with the energy, in order to meet the targets, we may need to do some of the projects more on a individual basis as opposed to the holistic, because the holistic projects do take considerable time, and sometimes we are able to, not sometimes, if you're having a smaller project, you can execute that faster. So it is a give and take. It is something I can absolutely assure you, every week we go through our capital plan. It is something I have a meeting with my directors every Wednesday, and the first topic on the agenda is we look at the capital plan and how we are doing. You know, a report very similar to this that shows us the budget, how much has been completed, what we have allocated, what we're anticipating to complete, what's been invoiced. And there have been significant improvements that have been made. Last year, unfortunately, the report that we were getting wasn't reconciling exactly to finance, and it was out significant dollar value. That has been rectified. There were some changes that were put into the home system, which is where we get our reporting from. It now aligns exactly with the finance reporting, so the reporting that we get on a weekly basis is accurate, and that is obviously what we need and we look at it on a weekly basis. And certainly if there's anything that we're concerned about, we have the ability to discuss it on a weekly basis. And, you know, we can make changes.
I think my concern is more about deferring projects because you're having to put money into a bucket that to some extent you don't have control over it. It's demand.
Understood.
And
Understood.
That's and also it goes to the point that we've discussed on many occasions where your threshold is so low in that bucket. And my concern is deferrals of things that are being planned because you have to utilize a significant portion of your 350 for the COXX. So
Absolutely understood and agreed.
Yeah. So and if there's risk of that, then I would like you to report it in so that we understand the impact of moving significant, because you're cutting budgets in half for items that you clearly had on your planning radar. And so I would ask that you report in as to the impact of those movements between the lines. Thank you, Brian.
I just wondered, is there any way to, and I don't want to add more work, but to relate this to the FCI? Because I mean, ultimately, a lot of these things would impact on that, I assume. And I mean, it's hard to translate this to see what the impact of all this is on the specific, we had that article in the paper and so I'm not sure whether I'm asking too much.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in. I think the last item in number 9 is the FCI tracking. So that's probably the best place. And we're going to talk about it briefly next. So that's where it nicely tracks, because I don't think we want to go to the level of each of these items, how it relates to the FCI, just in terms of, but in aggregate, how it moves. And I think this is a relatively new report, and I think it's great. Maybe we can allocate a little bit of time next quarter to just talk about, to Adele's point, the big swings. Like I count sort of three areas where there's 20 million plus swings from budget. And so to me, that's sort of time well spent just to make sure, we're being thoughtful about how we're allocating the capital between the different buckets.
Yeah.
So let's say that's
and they're large dollars as well as large percentages.
Yeah. And sort of halfway through the year, I think we should have a good view of what's being done and what's to go.
Yeah. Yes. And what's at risk because you are deferring. Brian?
No, that's fine. I just, trying to relate the two things.
Yes,
together.
which is important, Brian, because this is the money that we spend, and the requirement of this money being spent is to reduce the FCI to the 10%. That's the goal. Yeah. Right? So it's very important.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to get my head around trying to match this.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And make sure all the pieces fit together and we understand the implications. Are there any other questions on this report? Okay, could I have a motion to receive? Nick, thank you. Brian, thank you. All in favor? And I do agree, Nick, that it's something that time should be spent. So could we move on to item 9G? And that's the preventative maintenance. And I think that was me that pulled it. So Alan, I know this is your report. I think my question was very simple, and it was just about site visits. I think it was on page 90. Yeah, yes. I think it referenced that there's site visits for all work done.
There is, so before a payment can be made, the work does need to be verified. So for example, with maintenance requests that come through, so for preventive maintenance, the contractors would need to provide us that the work is done, and then there are random inspections that are done. For maintenance requests that are done, part of the process is that there has to be what we call a three-way match on it. So you have your work order that's opened, there is a PO that is issued for that individual piece of work, and then the invoice comes in, the invoice has to match the PO, and then the site super has to confirm that the work was completed satisfactorily. And then once there's that three-way match, then the payment for the maintenance piece of work would be authorized.
Okay, so the site supervisor is confirming that all work is being done satisfactorily?
The site
And-
super has to sign off, my understanding, on maintenance work orders. They do have to confirm that the work has been completed.
And is the tenant involved in this process at all? Like whoever's living in the unit?
I don't believe that the tenant
And
would
this
be.
goes to Mohammed's point, which he's raised in the past about work being performed satisfactorily.
I'm not able to speak to about the maintenance work. I do know that when we do capital work in a unit, like for example, I know the item wasn't held, but item 9A, for example, was approved for a state of good repair program, which is work that's done in a tenant unit. Now it's capital work, not maintenance work, because it would be like replacing a kitchen or bathroom, things like that. I can definitely confirm that when we do that work in a tenant unit, the work is inspected at the completion of that work. The tenant is involved in the inspection, and the tenant of course, assuming the tenant wants to, and the tenant has the ability to complete a survey at the end of it, which speaks to their grading the work that was done in their unit. Now, the response rates that we have, on average, it's about 31% of tenants that agree to complete the survey. Sometimes it depends on the building. We have a range anywhere from like 19%. Sometimes you almost get 100% of the tenants that do it. With the state of good repair work that's done through this capital program, 93% of tenants have been either very satisfied at 75%, or next category is somewhat satisfied at 18%. So there is a good level of satisfaction with that. I know that's different than the maintenance items, so I can't speak to that. But
okay, and all I'm asking is if you could check, because I know Mohammed has raised this with me, that that tenants don't get a say, and so I'm just interested when you say that the site supervisor does go in to determine that the work is done, whether the tenant is involved, and if you could just look into it.
Certainly, Chair Emery, I can connect with Richard and Nadia on that.
Yeah, perfect. I'm just bringing an issue that Mohammed's raised with me a couple of times. So that was my question on that 9G. Are there any other questions on this item? Could I have a motion to receive? Nick? Brian? Seconder? Thank you. All in favor? Perfect. And then the last item is 9I. And again, it's Alan and Nick. I think you pulled this, so I just, do you just want to go ahead with your questions, or?
Yeah, okay. Exactly. And Brian, this is sort of, I think, what you're alluding to. I'm looking at page 103, and sort of my first comment on the positive side is I think this is really positive results. This is a real testament to the capital and the team working on this, both the relative performance in terms of where we had expected to be back in 2017 to where we are today, and then the absolute performance. Like the goal is plus or minus 10, 11%, and we're at 12.5% for 2022. Like that's a big accomplishment. And I think, you know, the Toronto Star article this past week, I think the intention was to sort of find flaws, and anybody with a critical eye reading that article would not come away with that impression from my perspective. So I think just well done, and I think like just worth everyone sort of, you know, recognizing sort of the amount of work and so on, and the results. So that's great. And then I don't know, we talked about this earlier, but I don't know if we actually had a specific takeaway, but I do think we have a key risk on specific projects with high FCIs getting worse much quicker. First and foremost, obviously, that's a risk to tenants, you know, first, second, third, and fourth, fifth priority. But there's also then reputational risk, because those are the buildings that get the headlines. So can I ask for some sort of follow-up on either what our process is today or what it should be in terms of tracking those high FCI buildings or complexes, in terms of, is there maybe we're tracking them well, and maybe, you know, some things just get away from just in the time, but I just want to understand what our process is for those high risk projects. Because one of the lessons learned, I think, for me personally, is they get worse exponentially, not linearly. So we should be tracking those more closely, but maybe we're already doing that. So just as a follow-up, it'd be great next quarter to have a report on that, or sort of the views on what we do that.
Certainly, we, Director McCrae, and through the chair, we can certainly do that. Jill Sutherland, who's on the call here, I know she's not feeling well today, so, and has a really bad sore throat, so I may not ask her to speak, but certainly I can. We can put together some information on that, and I can assure you that our capital planning team that Jill leads does, you know, review the FCI. We know what it is per building. And we do take that into consideration. Obviously, we want to make sure that we meet our FCI target of what we committed to for the 10% in 2026, 2027. But we can certainly put that together for you. And also, as you move into the role of chair, congratulations. We're certainly more than happy to spend any time with you that you'd like to understand, the process that we go through, and show you how we capture things in the asset planner software and things like that, so that we can make sure that we're going to meet our targets for the FCI, for our energy that we have to do with CMHC accessibility and all those things. We're certainly happy to share any of that information and show you how we do capital planning at TCHC.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Brian?
I just wonder, because the article, not everybody looks at it with a critical eye, Nick, and I do think it may be an opportunity that we could have a letter to the editor from our new chair, pointing out the fact that we've been really focused on this, and it is coming down, and maybe now, since there was an article, we could respond to it and emphasize the positive work that, you know, the staff has done in reducing that. So just a suggestion.
So Jack, could I talk to Paula about that?
I was just going to recommend that, Chair Emery, I would recommend that perhaps that discussion be taken on with Paula Knight for advice on that.
Okay, so thank you, Brian, and I will talk to Paula about that. I know that she did work, or her team worked with the reporter to provide them information. The other comment I have is, I think, Nick, maybe we look at FCI broadly, and the goal is just the 10%, but that's for our whole portfolio. And I don't think BIFAC, has ever seen by building, and so they haven't been able to see the ones that really are at risk. And I think it goes back to the comments about the inspections, and do they need to be done more often? And also the comments about when you're taking large sums and large percentages out of certain lines in the budget, what impact and what risk does that have when you're servicing the demand as opposed to the other refurbishments? So they are all, like, I think these questions and comments are all connected. And so I do think BIFAC kind of needs to see how the portfolio looks. And I guess more importantly, the ones that are at risk and how you deal with those ones. So are there any other, so if Alan, if you can report that in or put it on the action list so that BIFAC sees that. Are there any other questions on 9I? Okay, hearing none, can I have a motion to receive Alan's report? Brian, John, thank you very much. All in favor? Perfect. And so that concludes the BIFAC meeting. There were no other items pulled. And if there's no other business that anyone wants to raise, I will ask for a motion to terminate my last BIFAC meeting. And good luck, guys.
Chair Emery, if I could have a little attitude to say thank you for your hard work, and to Director McRae, thank you for taking on the challenge.
Thank you, Nick.
And I want to remind you, Adele, you're ex officio on this committee.
Oh, so I can come and visit you guys.
We expect it.
Okay, I'll come and visit. Say hi, see how the guys are doing. Lily, keep them in line. Take care and thank you very much. I really appreciate the commitment from the 5 of you. I know Naram's not here, but the 5 of you to BIFAC. It's greatly appreciated. I do think it's really important. And, you know, I offered Tim Hortons gift cards and I still had no takers. Take care and we'll see you on Tuesday. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Bye.
Great weekend.
Oh, don't I have to have a motion? Nick?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. John, all in favor? Yay.
So much more
And
pleasant
thank you
when
to this
adjourn as opposed to terminate.
motion to
Adjourn.
terminate.
She thinks she's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Adele is terminated.
I'm terminated. I'm off the island.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, guys. Have a nice day and a nice weekend. Bye.
Bye-bye.